I love to visit caves. Now, don't misunderstand me. I'm not a spelunker. I never have, nor will I ever have, the desire to crawl on my hands and knees through a cold and dark hole in the ground. But I love to go on a guided tour. I suppose the biggest difference between spelunking and a tour is that on a tour, you don't get as muddy and wet, and there's no concern about getting lost. I've been on guided tours through caves in Ohio, Kentucky, Tennessee, South Dakota, Missouri, and Virginia. And on all the trips, they're all very similar in nature. We are always told the same thing, that the caves are the same cool temperature year-round. There's always in the cave what's called a fat man's misery, or a pass that's very narrow and hard to get through. The cave invariably has colored lights to make the stalactites and stalagmites glow in beautiful, beautiful colors. And we always hear the same lecture about how long it takes for those stalactites and stalagmites to grow. And then we are warned not to touch them. But the part of the tour I always look forward to is when they turn off the lights. You see, it's an odd and eerie feeling to be in complete darkness, when you cannot literally even see your hand in front of your face. When that happens, you tend to lose your sense of balance and direction. Now, back in the days when I still wore a watch, I would like to turn on the little watch display light at that point of the tour. You see, normally the light on that little watch wasn't much of a light. On a sunny day, you couldn't even see the light if you turned it on. But in the total darkness of a cave, the light seemed to fill the whole place. Jesus often referred to those who were lost as being in darkness. Sinclair Ferguson wrote, "The problem with living in darkness is the effect it has on one's ability to see clearly and to distinguish one object from another. A person loses direction and becomes disoriented, and men have lost their sense of moral bearings and are blind to the terrible consequences. We call evil good. For instance, the very people who campaign against nuclear armaments because they're concerned for the future of humanity are often those who are pro-abortion and thus deny the future to millions of embryonic members of humanity. What logic is this? What enlightenment takes modern man back to practices that were abominated in what he's pleased to call the Dark Ages?" Our text today is Matthew chapter 5, verses 13 through 16. And Matthew chapter 5, verses 13 through 16 is a general statement by Jesus of what we should be like. It's interesting to note that Jesus is not speaking here to the important people of his day. He's not addressing the movers and shakers of Israel, but he's instructing the everyday, common man and woman. When we look around and see all the sin and evil in this corrupted world, it's easy to say, someone should do something about that. We never think that we can do anything ourselves because we aren't that important. And we don't have that much influence in this world. But you know, just as the little light of my watch would cut through the darkness of a black cave, so we too can cut through the blackness of our world. The teaching of Jesus in our text here is not hard to understand. In fact, he's not even telling us something that to do something that we are not, to be something we are not, or to do something that's hard. We're just to be what we were meant to be. So pass the salt and turn the light, and let's see how we can praise God about who we are. First, Jesus says, "You are the salt of the earth." He says that in verse 13, Matthew chapter 5, verse 13. He says, "You are the salt of the earth." And then he goes on to define what that means. But if the salt loses its saltiness, how can it be made salty again? It is no longer good for anything except to be thrown out and trampled by men. Very simply, Jesus is telling us that we are to be like salt and add flavor to the world around us. And being the salt of the earth is not something that someone else does. It's not even something that we do as a group or as a church. Being salt is what each of us as individuals are to be. Jesus is not teaching us to be something that we're not, but to embrace the thing that we already are. We are the salt of the earth. Now notice what this verse is implying. The biblical scholar Martin Lloyd-Jones wrote, "It clearly implies rottenness in the earth. It implies a tendency to pollution and to becoming foul and offensive." Filmmakers have actually understood this concept, maybe without even realizing the spiritual connotations. For instance, in the movie It's a Wonderful Life, when the Jimmy Stewart character, George Bailey, gets his wish and is never born, the sleepy little community of Bedford Falls changed to Pottersville and was full of vice and sin. In the movie Back to the Future 2, after the bully Biff discovers a time machine, he destroys what is good and through his knowledge of the future changes the town from a nice little suburb to a den of iniquity and evil. But you know, those are only movies. Those are only movies. I wonder what would happen in the real world if it tried to exist without God. Is it a coincidence that the increase of crime and violence in schools began the same year prayer was banned from those institutions? And did the breakdown in families, the rising divorce rate, the legalization of abortion, and the so-called sexual revolution just happen? Or is there a connection to those things? And the theology emphasized in the 1960s that God is dead. Paul describes a world that rejects God with these words in Romans chapter 1. Listen as I read the beginning of Romans chapter 1, verse 28. "Furthermore, since they did not think it worthwhile to retain the knowledge of God, he gave them over to a depraved mind, to do what ought not to be done. They have become filled with every kind of wickedness, evil, greed, and depravity. They are full of envy, murder, strife, deceit, and malice. They are gossips, slanderers, God-haters, insolent, arrogant, and boastful. They invent ways of doing evil. They disobey their parents. They are senseless, faithless, heartless, ruthless." You know, as I read that scripture, I wonder, did Paul really write those words 2,000 years ago? Or did he just look around at our world today? Strictly speaking, salt cannot lose its saltiness. Sodium chloride is a stable compound. But most of the salt in the ancient world came from salt marshes rather than by evaporation of sea salt, and therefore it contained many impurities. The actual salt in those days was able to dissolve faster than some of the impurities, leaving a substance that was of little worth except to create a hard path to walk on. So how do we as salt flavor the world? I came across an explanation of what it means to be salt in a real old commentary I had. It basically said that when a Christian enters a room, immediately his or her presence has an effect. And to be honest, when I read that, I first thought, well, that's an oversimplified, naive, and maybe not completely accurate definition. But then I came across the same explanation in another, more modern commentary. And it got me to thinking, do people actually modify their actions and language when they know we are present? When I began in ministry, It irked me when people talked differently in my presence. They acted like I had never heard any of their cuss words before, and their usage might somehow hurt my sensitive ears. I felt uncomfortable, knowing that people acted differently when the preacher was there. So I like to go places back then where no one knew that I was a preacher, and they began to act naturally. I felt it was a compliment when people told me, "You don't act like a preacher." But looking back, I think now maybe that's not such a good thing. Maybe if they don't know who I am, then that's not being very salty. If a poll were taken among your friends and co-workers that don't attend church here, how many would know that you're a Christian? You see, being salt means our presence makes a difference. Can it make someone refrain from sinning? Can it lift someone out of the gutter and bring them to a higher plane? I don't know, but I do know that salt adds flavor to food. That's why they're bland, doesn't it? When those around us are dying for a little flavor, do they know where to find the salt? Pass the salt. The world needs it. Then Jesus says, "You are the light of the world." That's found in verse 14. You are the light of the world. And then Jesus goes on through verse 15, explaining what he means. A city on a hill cannot be hidden. Neither do people light a lamp and put it under a bowl. Instead, they put it on a stand, and it gives light to everyone in the house. You see, being salt is kind of passive. They know we're a Christian. They know what we generally stand for, but we don't do anything. We're just there. We're salt. And people can use us if they want to. That's why Jesus switches metaphors here from salt to light. Because light shows us the way to go. You can go on a salt-free diet, but you cannot ignore a light when it's shining in your face. In 1 Corinthians chapter 1, Paul talks about the foolishness of preaching. By foolish, he does not mean silly. He means different. The church should stand in contrast to the world. And there's no reason to be ashamed of or hide our light, because regardless if people want to accept it or not, we have the light of the world. Sterling Park Christian Church needs to be a shining light in Sterling that's not only noticed by the people here, but a light that attracts others to Jesus. Unfortunately, we too often confuse true light with the glittering glow of artificial light. The true light, of course, is Jesus. The artificial light are programs and methods. The artificial light burns out, but the true light lasts forever. Sadly, we have bought the lie that we must make the church more attractive to non-Christians, even if it means hiding the light under a bushel because we don't want to offend someone. Now, don't get me wrong. We do need to offer the best that we have. It's essential to stay on the cutting edge of technology and use new programs. However, the world is stumbling around in darkness, looking not for more entertainment, but for the light. There was once a man inspecting a mine shaft. As he wandered the endless maze of tunnels, suddenly his light went out. Thrust into total darkness, he began to grope aimlessly for a way out. This is the reason I prefer to take safe, organized tours of caves instead of exploring the darkness on my own. Well, fear and panic began to overtake the man as he cut his head on low ceilings and bruised his knees on pieces of rock and coal jutting from the sides, and continually banged into the unseen walls. Finally, exhausted and bloody, he fell to his knees and cried out, "I'm lost! I'm lost!" Nearby, a miner heard the cry And realizing where he was, he called back, "Don't move. You are near the edge. If you go on by yourself, you will fall to your death. Look for my light. When you see it, come straight to it, and you will be saved." Jesus does not just tell us here how to be good examples. That's a big part of it. That's a main part of it. But he tells us we are to reach out to those in the dark. We must give the light to those who are lost. Because being a Christian means we have the light. And that light must shine. When I flew to the Dominican Republic on a mission trip some 18 years ago, it was dark when we reached the island. And as the plane began to descend, I looked out the window. I remember seeing nothing but total darkness. I could not tell where the horizon was. I could not tell where the ocean was below us. It was just dark. I knew we were over the ocean, but I did not know how high up we were. And I knew there were some mountains on the island, but I did not know how big or how close we were to them. I kept staring out into the darkness as the plane continued to sink lower and lower. I wished we had arrived when it was still light outside. Finally, the plane turned, and I saw below me the lights of a small town. And I knew we were in the right place. Most commentaries on this text spend a lot of time trying to define what it means to be a bushel. Covering with a bushel. Exactly what Jesus meant by a bushel actually is less important, however, than the fact that the light is covered. And what happens when you cover a candle too long? The light goes out. Well, I can't go on the sermon any farther without us singing the children's song. Okay, this will light the light. So we're going to sing this together. Ready? We're going to use the motions too. All right. So get your candles up, your lights up. Okay. Everybody put your finger up like this. Okay. Let's sing this together. This little light of mine, I'm going to let it shine. This little light of mine, I'm going to let it shine. This little light of mine, I'm going to let it shine. Let it shine. Let it shine. Let it shine. Hide it under a bushel. No, I'm going to let it shine. Hide it under a bushel, no, I'm going to let it shine. Hide it under a bushel, no, I'm going to let it shine. Let it shine, let it shine, let it shine. Shine all over Sterling Park, I'm going to let it shine. Shine all over Sterling Park, I'm going to let it shine. Shine all over Sterling Park, I'm going to let it shine. Let it shine, let it shine, let it shine. Won't let Satan get out, I'm going to let it shine. Won't let Satan get out, I'm going to let it shine. Won't let Satan get out, I'm going to let it shine. Let it shine, let it shine, let it shine. You know, isn't it time we turned on the light? Finally, Jesus tells us we are to be the salt of the earth, light of the world, so people will know God. Verse 16. In the same way, let your light shine before men, that they may see your good deeds and praise your Father in heaven. With this verse, Jesus makes an application to the metaphors of salt and light. Dietrich Bonhoeffer wrote, "A community of Jesus which seeks to hide itself has ceased to follow him." And the famous 19th century preacher Charles Spurgeon added, "I would not give much for your religion unless it can be seen." Lamps do not talk, but they do shine. So let your actions shine out your religion. Let the main sermon of your life be illustrated by all your conduct, and it shall not fail to be illustrious. The challenge Jesus gives us here: can we live like a Christian in a non-Christian world? Specifically, what he's talking about is our acts of righteousness, or the good things we do. Throughout the rest of the Sermon on the Mount, Jesus will illustrate what those acts are. But for now, understand that basically he's talking about our good deeds. Notice that the good things we do come after we receive the light, not before. Because being good enough has nothing to do with our salvation. Being good has everything to do with how we live our Christian life. Being salt and light will not save us, but having those attributes will save others. There's something horribly wrong when people say they love Jesus, but not the church. That's very popular today. Say they love Jesus, but not the church. Yet that's a very popular excuse today, not to go to church. Now granted, there have been abuses in churches, and there have been some real scoundrels who have led the church, and probably there's not one among us here who has not been turned off by or seen others drop out of church because of the attitude of a few who were less than Christian. However, 1 John chapter 4, verse 20 reminds us, if anyone says, I love God, yet hates his brother, he is a liar. For anyone who does not love his brother whom he has seen cannot love God whom he has not seen. Maybe what needs to happen in many churches today is our salt and light need to permeate each other as well. Instead of bickering and fighting, maybe we need to give each other a little pinch of salt. Maybe instead of trying to get our way, we need to increase the wattage of our light on each other. And many churches have failed. Their salt has lost its saltiness, and their light has been hidden. We need to remember that the light we shine and the salt we have is not our own. It's from God. At best, we are just a reflected light of Jesus and a shaker for the real salt to be stored. But the result of us being a reflector and a shaker is that people will not see us, but they will see Jesus. Many years ago, there was a movie called Outbreak. It was the story of an incurable and fatal virus that affected a town, killing everyone in its wake. Several times in the movie, the camera would show a shot of a small town that was being infected. And it was a typical pastoral scene, buildings and homes surrounded by lush trees. And I noticed in the picture there were a couple of church steeples. But not once during the movie was God or faith ever mentioned. It was as if they did not exist. Now I realized that was just a movie, and the filmmakers were not making a theological statement, but I couldn't stop thinking about what was missing. The church building added to the beautiful picture of the town, but it had no real importance when people were dying. Too often, I'm afraid that's the attitude of the world today. Church is nice, but it really doesn't affect my life in any way. It's a good place to have a wedding, and it's appropriate to have a preacher at a funeral, but beyond that, it's just part of the scenery. Could it be that we have lost our saltiness and hidden our light? Isn't it time we pass the salt and turn on the light so the world will know?